Aloha and welcome back to the Kauai Real Estate podcast. Today's episode is going to be part 3 of the August 2024 new purchase contract review. I'm discussing the changes that we've seen in this new contract. And for those who have not listened to part 1 and part 2 and are used to listening to my podcast, I normally have a wing it style. I'm going to have a more organized style for this because it's actually based on a contract. So just hang in there with me or skip to another episode if you prefer the wing it episodes more so than these factual ones. And I'm going to jump right in. First of all, I have a correction to part 2 or episode 2 of this series. When discussing the language changes in the I-5 general disclosures, I called it section 1. I don't know why I did that. Probably because an I and a 1 look pretty much the same when you're writing them out. But at any rate, I wanted to make sure to get that clarified. Also, I don't know how I skipped J1 as it's probably one of the most, if not the most important contingencies. So let's start with the J1 general inspection of property contingency. That contingency now explicitly states what many agents already know, which is that if you delete that contingency, which is often done when you're waiving inspections, it affects rights and obligations in other paragraphs like J3 and J4. J3 is the property condition maintenance final walkthrough, and it's to confirm that the property's in the same condition as it was during J1. Obviously, if there's no J1, that walkthrough doesn't have anything to compare it to, so it invalidates it. So I just want to make sure to point that out. Now we are back on track. Or at least alphabetically. So let's jump into section M and the changes there. M1 mandatory provision of documents now requires that documents be provided, quote, along with an itemized list of those documents, unquote. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise. Most agents do require or do include a receipt listing the documents when they present them. Now it is a requirement. Buyers still have to provide a receipt, and there will be a review period based on the negotiations for that contingency. The M2 delivery of documents, format options, and language have changed slightly, but they're essentially the same. Buyer can opt for any of the following formats, which are printed hard copies, electronically formatted on storage device, electronically formatted via email, or hyperlinked to specific documents. The latter would refer to things like Dropbox or preliminary title report with links to the recorded documents and those types of things. M3, the section about documents issued during the escrow period, now has a spot to state the number of days from discovery that information has to be provided, not that it will just be provided if they receive some, and it has an amended disclosure requirement. As I talked about in the prior episode, the amended disclosure is coming up more frequently in this contract, or maybe not more frequently, but more blatantly. Let's move on. The O1 termination due to default has changes from shall to will, and prior change to before. There are also the capital letter changes we talked about in the first episode of this series. O2 termination within a contingency time period was rewritten, but overall requires that a party terminate before it expires, or it's waived and it can no longer be used. P1 HARPTA has some language changes. It requires sellers obtain and provide buyers with a certification for exemption form N-289 as opposed to an authorized exemption. They also have the option of providing an approved waiver. This is due 14 days prior to the closing date from seller to buyer. And the same changes were made in the P2 HARPTA contingency, certification and approval. No longer the language that said authorized exemption or exemption waiver. S4 fair housing language was revamped to the seller will not discriminate against a buyer in the real estate transaction contemplated by the purchase contract. Okay, this is a short and sweet one compared to the other ones. I know these contract change podcast episodes have been longer and, quite frankly, more dense than usual. Oh, just to be clear, I definitely mean more dense in terms of compacted in substance and a lot of information, not more dense as in stupid. Bear with me and my sense of humor. If you have any questions about this contract or Hawaii real estate, or you're ready to sell or purchase property, I would love to connect with you. You can find my contact information in the episode notes, at the bottom, in the description, or somewhere near where you're listening right now. You can also visit my website, onornearthebeach.com.